The night was alive with sound. Leaves rustled in the cold wind, branches creaked, and somewhere far away, a deep growl echoed. Corinne ran through the jungle, her heart pounding like a drum inside her chest. Her legs burned with every step. But she did not dare slow down. She could hear them, the predator pack, moving behind her. Fast, silent, hunting her like shadows in the dark. The air was heavy and wet. Her breath came out in sharp bursts. The scent of blood was strong. Her own blood, dripping from a cut on her arm. She had been running for what felt like hours. Every time she thought she had lost them, a branch would snap or a low growl would come from the trees. They were playing with her. The predators loved the chase. Corinne's eyes darted from shadow to shadow. She could not see them, but she knew they were there. The pack moved like ghosts. One moment far away, the next right behind her. Her people had told stories of the predator pack since she was a child. They were more than animals. They hunted for sport, for pleasure, and for the thrill of the kill. Her weapon was gone. It had broken earlier when she tripped over a root and rolled down a hill. Now she had only her claws, but she knew they would be useless against the armored hides of the predators. The jungle seemed to close in around her. Tall, twisted trees reached out like claws. Their leaves dripped with cold water that fell onto her face and neck. A roar shattered the night. It was close, too close. Corinne's heart jumped in her chest. She pushed herself harder, her feet splashing through a shallow stream. The cold water stung the cuts on her legs, but she kept moving. The roar was followed by a second sound, heavy paws hitting the ground. They were running now. The game was almost over. Corinne's breathing grew ragged. Her vision blurred as the jungle swayed around her. She stumbled over a rock, catching herself against a tree. The bark tore at her palms. Somewhere behind her, a low, rumbling growl rolled through the air. She turned her head slowly. Two glowing yellow eyes stared at her from the darkness. They were unblinking, hungry, patient. She ran again. Branches whipped against her face. She could hear the predators spreading out, their footsteps in the leaves all around her. They were hurting her, pushing her toward a place of their choosing. Her throat tightened with fear. She wanted to scream, but she knew it would only make them faster. The jungle floor dipped downward. She slid through mud and wet leaves until she stumbled into a small clearing. Moonlight spilled onto the ground through a gap in the canopy. For a moment, everything was still. Corinne's ears twitched, trying to catch any sound. But the silence was worse than the growls. It meant they were watching. Her chest rose and fell in quick, shallow breaths. She turned slowly, scanning the shadows. One by one, they stepped into the moonlight, 6 of them, each larger than she had imagined. Their bodies were covered in thick, bone-like armor. Their eyes glowed in the dark. Their long tails lashed the ground like whips. The leader was the largest, his armor darker, his teeth longer, his movements slower, more certain. The predators fanned out in a circle around her. Corinne backed away until her heel touched a tree. There was nowhere left to run. Her claws slid from her fingertips, but she knew it was useless. The leader stepped forward. His breath came out in hot, steaming clouds. He lowered his head, muscles coiling like springs. She braced herself for the final strike. A strange sound cut through the night. It was sharp, loud, and unlike anything she had ever heard. A flash of blue light streaked across the clearing. One of the predators let out a screech and fell to the ground. The others froze, their heads snapping toward the trees. Another flash of light. Another predator fell. The leader snarled, backing away for the first time. Corinne's eyes widened. Through the smoke and shadows, a figure stepped into the clearing, tall, armored, and carrying a weapon she had never seen. The visor on its helmet glowed faintly, hiding its face. It moved with calm steps as if the predators did not scare it at all. Corinne had never seen anything like it. It was not from her world, and yet it had just saved her life. The leader roared in challenge. The strange figure raised its weapon. The jungle, moments ago full of death, was now filled with a new, burning question. Who was this stranger, And why was he here? Asterisk. For a moment, the clearing was frozen in silence. The predators stared at the strange newcomer, their tails twitching with unease. They had never seen armor like that, never smelled anything like the scent that came from this figure. It was sharp, metallic, mixed with something warm and human. Corinne pressed her back against the tree, her chest still rising and falling in quick bursts. She could feel the ground vibrating under the predator's claws. They were deciding, attack or run. The leader gave his answer. A deep, thunderous roar shook the clearing. His pack moved as one, spreading out, their glowing eyes locked on. The stranger, the human, didn't move. His visor reflected the moonlight like the surface of still water. In his hands, the weapon hummed softly, its edges glowing a cold blue. Corinne's breath caught. The predators were faster than she remembered. One leapt from the left, claws reaching for the human's neck. The weapon fired. A burst of light cut through the air, and the predator's armored chest exploded in sparks and steam. The creature fell without a sound. Two more rushed in from opposite sides. The human spun. One shot taking the first in the leg, it crashed into the ground, thrashing. The other came too close. The weapon was too slow to aim. In one smooth motion, the human let go with one hand and swung his armored fist. The impact cracked the predator's jaw with a sound like breaking stone. Corinne's eyes widened. This was no ordinary warrior. Every move was sharp, controlled, as if he had fought these creatures before. But the pack was relentless. Their leader barked a guttural order, and they all attacked at once, teeth, claws, tails, a storm of movement and violence. The human stepped back, drawing them toward the center of the clearing. He switched the weapon to one hand and pulled something from his belt with the other. A small metal sphere, smooth and dark. He pressed a button and tossed it to the ground. It exploded in a burst of light so bright, Corinne had to shield her eyes. The predators screamed, blinded, stumbling in confusion. It should have been the end, but the leader wasn't done. He lunged blindly, claws extended, his size making him dangerous even without sight. The human sidestepped, but not fast enough. The claws tore into his armor with a sharp, screeching sound. Corinne gasped, her instincts screaming at her to move, to help, but her body stayed frozen. The human didn't fall. He dropped his weapon, grabbed the leader's arm, and twisted with brutal strength. Bone cracked. The leader roared in pain, and the human slammed him into the ground. In the same motion, he pulled a short blade from his boot, not glowing, not advanced, just steel, and drove it into the soft flesh under the leader's chin. The clearing went silent again. The surviving predators backed away, their eyes shifting between the human and their fallen leader. With a low growl, they turned and melted into the jungle. Their shadows vanished into the trees, leaving only the sound of distant thunder. Corinne stood there, unable to speak. The stranger bent down, picked up his weapon, and turned toward her. For the first time, she saw him clearly. The armor was scratched and dented, steam rising from the places where claws had struck. But he stood tall, breathing steady. He was not just a survivor, he was a hunter in his own right. He took a slow step forward, his visor still hiding his face. Then, in a deep, steady voice, he spoke words she did not understand, but the meaning was clear. Stay close. Corinne stayed where she was. Her claws were still out, her breath still sharp. The human's voice had been calm, but there was steel in it, the kind that came from someone who had killed before. He moved closer, boots sinking into the wet jungle earth with a quiet, deliberate rhythm. The glowing visor turned toward her, and for a moment, she saw her own reflection, small, trembling, blood on her skin. She hated how fragile she looked. The weapon in his hands was unlike anything she had ever seen. It didn't smell like energy weapons from her world. It had a faint, strange scent. Heated metal, burnt ozone, something alien. She wondered if it could kill her as easily as it had killed the predators. The thought made her tail flick nervously. The human stopped just a few paces away. With a smooth motion, he slung the weapon across his back. Then, to her surprise, he reached up and pressed a latch on his helmet. There was a hiss of air. The visor lifted, and Corinne's heart skipped. His face was pale, his eyes sharp and a color she had never seen in nature. One was bright green, the other a dull gray with a thin scar running through it. His expression was unreadable. Not anger, not kindness, something colder. He studied her like she was a puzzle. Or prey. Corinne felt the urge to step back, but his gaze pinned her in place. "Water," he said slowly, pointing to the flask at his side. His accent was strange, his voice deep and flat. She didn't understand the word, but his gesture was clear. She nodded, and he tossed the flask underhand toward her. The weight of it surprised her, heavier than she expected. The liquid inside smelled clean, different from any water in the jungle. Corinne drank carefully, never taking her eyes off him. He watched her the entire time, not moving. When she handed it back, his lips curved slightly. Not quite a smile, more like recognition. Then he crouched, pulling a small packet from a pouch. He tore it open with his teeth, breaking off a piece of something dry and dense. He held it out to her. The scent was strange, not meat, not plant, something in between. Stomach growled, but she didn't take it. The human tilted his head, studying her reaction. Then he shrugged and ate it himself. His eyes flicked to the shadows around them. Scanning constantly, every few seconds, he would adjust his stance, as if ready to fight again. It struck her. This was a man who never truly rested. Finally, he pointed to himself. "Daniel," he said, slow and clear. The sound of the name was sharp, clipped. Then he pointed at her. She hesitated, unsure if giving her name was wise. "Corinne," she said at last. Daniel repeated it quietly, as if testing the weight of it on his tongue. The silence stretched between them. Somewhere in the jungle, a distant howl echoed. Daniel stood, checking his weapon, without looking at her. He said a single word in his own language. The tone made it clear. They were moving now, and as Corinne followed, she realized something unsettling. She had no idea if she was walking beside her savior or her captor, Asterisk. The jungle seemed to close in around them. Every shadow felt alive. Every leaf's rustle sounded like claws. Daniel walked in front, his steps silent despite the weight of his armor. Corinne followed, her eyes scanning the trees. The air smelled wrong, sharp metallic, with the faint stink of predator musk. They were being followed again. Daniel stopped suddenly, raising one hand without looking back. Corinne froze, ears twitching. At first, she heard nothing then. A faint scrape of claws against stone. It came from above. She tilted her head, and her stomach turned. One of the predators was clinging to the side of a tree. Its armored body blended with the bark, its glowing eyes fixed on them. Daniel raised his weapon, but before he could fire, a second predator dropped from the branches behind him. The impact knocked him forward. His weapon flew from his hands into the mud. Corinne reacted without thinking. She lunged at the predator on his back, slashing at its face. Her claws scraped against bone armor, but she hit soft flesh near its eye. It roared, whipping its tail, the force knocking her off her feet. Daniel rolled, grabbed a knife from his belt, and drove it into the creature's side. The predator howled and leapt away, vanishing into the trees. Another sound rose. More footsteps. Corinne's ears flattened. The rest of the pack was coming. Daniel retrieved his weapon, but the ground shook as three predators emerged from the dark. They didn't charge this time. They circled, cutting off every path. Daniel's visor flickered for a moment. A red warning light she didn't understand. He switched his weapon to short bursts instead of long streams, conserving whatever power it had left. Corinne noticed his movements were faster now, sharper. He was planning for something. Then he spoke. A short word in his language. It was sharp, commanding. And though she didn't know the meaning, she understood. Move now. Daniel stepped toward the nearest predator, firing twice. It dodged, forcing him back. Corinne ran the opposite way, and realized too late he wasn't running with her. She spun just in time to see him throw a small device to the ground. It blinked once, twice, then exploded in a flash and a scream. The predators staggered, their senses overwhelmed. Daniel grabbed her arm and pulled her into the trees. They ran until her lungs burned. The jungle seemed endless. Every time she thought they had escaped, another growl came from the shadows. The predators weren't chasing blindly. They were hurting them again. Daniel must have realized it too, because he slowed, scanning the trees. Then, without warning, he shoved her to the ground. A massive predator lunged over her head, its claws catching nothing but air. It hit a tree and spun back toward them. Daniel raised his weapon. It clicked but didn't fire. The power was gone. For the first time since she had met him, Corinne saw hesitation in his eyes. He dropped the weapon, pulling the steel blade instead. The predator roared, charging. Daniel stepped forward, not back. Corinne felt the urge to move, to help, and this time she did. She darted to the side, claws ready. If they were going to die here, they would fight together. The jungle was quiet now. Not peaceful, just the kind of silence that comes when predators pause their hunt. The air was thick with the smell of damp earth and blood. Daniel moved first, wiping the blade on his armor before sliding it back. Into its sheath, Corinne's claws retracted slowly. Though her hands still trembled, her heartbeat hadn't slowed. They were alive, but the hunt wasn't over. Daniel didn't speak. He retrieved his useless weapon from the mud, checked it, and clipped it to his back. A thin red light blinked near the grip. Whatever power it had was almost gone. Corinne didn't know what that meant for him, but she understood one thing. Without it, he was just flesh and steel. Like her, they walked in silence for a while. Daniel kept scanning the trees, every step measured. Corinne followed, trying to match his pace. Her ears flicked at every distant sound. Once, she caught him glancing back at her, not with gratitude, but calculation, as if measuring her worth or her danger. They found shelter in a cluster of thick-rooted trees, their roots twisted upward into a hollow space large enough for two. Daniel stepped in first, scanning the corners before signaling her inside. Corinne hesitated. Stepping into an enclosed space with someone she didn't trust felt like stepping into a trap. But the night air carried faint growls again. She chose the trap she could see over the one she couldn't. Inside, Daniel dropped his pack and began removing pieces of his armor. The chest plate came off with a hiss, revealing dark fabric underneath. It was damp with sweat. And Corinne noticed deep claw marks across the plating. One had torn through, leaving a thin line of blood on his side. He didn't flinch, just cleaned it with a small pouch of liquid that stung her nose. The smell was sharp, chemical, alien. Corinne watched him from the other side of the hollow. Finally, she spoke, her voice low. "You. Not from here." Her language was strange to him, she knew that. But his eyes lifted, meeting hers. He gave a single nod, slow, deliberate. Then he tapped his chest lightly. "Human," he said. She tilted her head. The word meant nothing to her, but the way he said it, like it carried weight, made her remember it. Daniel pulled out another packet of food, tore it open, and tossed her a portion. It landed near her claws. She stared at it, then at him. Trusting food from an unknown species was dangerous, but her body ached, her stomach burned with hunger. She sniffed it, tore off a small piece, and chewed. It was dry but warm, not poison, for a few minutes. They ate without speaking. The jungle outside shifted with unseen movements. Somewhere above, something screamed. Not predator, not prey, something stranger. Daniel looked up briefly, as if recognizing the sound. Then he dug into his pack and pulled out a small device. It was a flat metal plate with a dim screen. Corinne leaned forward slightly, curiosity tugging at her. On the screen, glowing shapes moved. Not pictures, not maps she understood, but Daniel's eyes tracked them carefully. He tapped the surface, and tiny symbols shifted. A quiet beep sounded. His jaw tightened. Corinne's tail flicked. She could tell from his posture that this was important. She crawled a little closer. "What? That?" she asked slowly. Daniel looked at her, his expression unreadable. Then, without answering, he shut the device and slid it back into his pack. She narrowed her eyes. It wasn't just a weapon he had come here with. It was a mission. And that mission wasn't about her. She wondered if saving her had been part of his plan. Or just a side effect. The night dragged on. Outside, the jungle stayed restless. Daniel sat near the entrance, his blade in his lap. Corinne curled against the far wall of the hollow, her claws resting loosely on the dirt. Neither of them slept. Deeply, every time she stirred, she saw his silhouette, still watching. She couldn't tell if he was watching for predators or watching her. Morning came slowly in the jungle. The first light was not warm, it was pale and thin, cutting through the mist that clung to the trees like ghostly fingers. Corinne woke to the sound of soft clicks and metal tapping. Daniel was already up, crouched near the entrance of the hollow, his hands busy. In front of him, strange shapes made from branches, wire, and small metal pieces were arranged in the dirt. She had seen traps before, but nothing like this. He glanced up briefly when he noticed her watching, then went back to work without a word. Corinne crawled closer, curiosity outweighing caution. The smell from his tools was strange, sharp, oily, mixed with something burnt. It reminded her of the weapon he carried. One of the devices in front of him let out a faint hum. The sound made the fur along her spine rise. She pointed to it. "What?" she asked slowly. Daniel paused, considering her. Then he reached for a stick and drew a quick shape in the dirt, a crude outline of the predator pack's head. He circled it, then drew a jagged line through it. Corinne tilted her head. A trap, a kill. She understood. They set out shortly after. Daniel moved with purpose, checking the ground for tracks, marking trees with small scratches only he seemed to notice. Corinne realized he wasn't just traveling, he was mapping. Every landmark, every sound, every shift in the air seemed to register in his mind. He was building a picture of this place, and not just to survive. They stopped near a wide river that cut through the jungle. The water was slow, its surface smooth, like dark glass. Corinne bent down to drink, but Daniel stopped her with a sharp gesture. He picked up a small stone and tossed it into the water. Seconds later, the calm surface erupted. A long-scaled creature snapped at the disturbance, its teeth like hooked blades. Corinne stepped back quickly, her tail twitching. Daniel gave a short, dry sound, not laughter, but close. As they moved along the riverbank, the air grew heavy. Corinne noticed a faint scent on the wind. Predator musk, but different, older. She stopped, sniffing the air. Daniel stopped too, scanning ahead. Then she saw it. Massive claw marks gouged into a fallen log. They weren't fresh, but they were deep. The predators had been here recently. And something about the marks made her uneasy. Daniel knelt, running a gloved hand over the grooves. He didn't speak, but his visor turned toward the trees beyond the river. There was something there, something he already knew about. She wanted to ask, but he stood and kept moving. It was like chasing shadows by midday. The jungle changed. The trees grew thinner, their bark pale and brittle. The ground was soft, covered in strange, flat leaves that crumbled underfoot. Corinne's ears twitched. No birds, no insects. The air was dead here. Daniel slowed, crouching low. He pulled a small device from his belt, flat, with a short antenna. It emitted a faint pulse of blue light that rippled through the air like water. He studied the readings on the screen, then shut it off quickly. Whatever he saw, he didn't share. They camped early. Daniel built a small fire, not for warmth, but to burn something he had collected earlier. Pieces of predator bone. The smell was foul, but Corinne noticed the smoke had a bitter tang. It clung to her fur. She realized it might be a scent mask. Another trick to keep the predators from finding them. When night fell, Corinne pretended to sleep, but her eyes stayed half open. She watched Daniel as he sat by the dying fire, his face dimly lit by the orange glow. Slowly, he reached into his pack and pulled out the metal plate device again. This time, he didn't just tap it. He spoke softly into it. She couldn't understand the words, but the tone was low, controlled, almost secret. Then a faint voice replied from the device, tinny and distant. Corinne's heart quickened. He wasn't alone. Daniel ended the exchange quickly. He glanced toward her, and she shut her eyes fully. Her breathing slowed. She heard him shift his position, the quiet scrape of his blade being checked. He didn't trust her, but now she was sure of something. Daniel's mission had nothing to do with her survival, and yet, for reasons she couldn't name, she was becoming part of it. The night sky above the jungle burned with streaks of pale blue light. Not stars, flares, dropping through the canopy like falling embers. Corinne had never seen them before, but Daniel moved as if he'd been waiting for them. His pace was urgent now, not careful. Every few steps, he checked a small wrist device. Its green light blinking faster and faster. Something was coming, or maybe someone. The jungle ahead grew louder, not with animals, but with the low, steady thud of heavy footsteps. Corinne's fur rose. She knew that rhythm. The predator pack was moving together, a war march. No stalking, no games. They were coming for a fight. Daniel stopped in a clearing, bordered by jagged black stones. He dropped his pack and began unloading the strange devices she had seen him build. Small metal pods, flat plates, and wires strung between them. He worked fast, his hands sure and steady. Corinne crouched nearby, scanning the trees. "What you do?" she asked sharply. Daniel didn't answer. He only pointed toward a narrow gap between two stones, a choke point. Then he pressed a button, and the jungle floor hummed with hidden energy. The first predator appeared minutes later. It didn't roar. It simply stepped into view, its armor glinting faintly in the flare light above. Behind it, shapes moved in the shadows. More eyes, more teeth. Corinne's claws slid free. Daniel raised his weapon. Its blue light flickered weakly. Still low power. But he didn't hesitate. The leader emerged, bigger than before. Its bone armor scarred from past battles. This was not the same one from the first night. This was older, meaner. Its growl was deep enough to vibrate the ground beneath her feet. It scanned Daniel, then Corinne, and she realized with a sick twist in her stomach, they weren't just here for her anymore. They wanted him. The first charge came fast. Two predators broke from the shadows. Daniel fired short bursts, dropping one with a shot to the throat. The other leapt clear, only to slam into a thin wire strung between the stones. The air erupted in blue light as the trap discharged. The predator convulsed and fell smoking to the dirt, but the pack didn't slow. 3 more came in at once. Corinne moved without thinking, meeting one head-on, her claws scraped against its face, blinding it in one eye. Daniel took down another with a precise burst, but the third crashed into him, knocking the weapon from his hands. They rolled in the dirt, the predator's jaws snapping inches from his neck. Corinne lunged, grabbing the creature's tail and yanking hard. It turned on her with a roar. Daniel took the opening, slamming his steel blade up under its jaw. The leader hadn't moved yet. It was watching, studying. Then, with slow, deliberate steps, it entered the clearing. Daniel retrieved his weapon, checked the charge, and frowned. Only 1 shot left. He met Corinne's gaze for the first time that night. There was no need for words. They would finish this together, or not at all. The leader lunged. Daniel fired. The blue blast caught it in the shoulder, spinning it, but it didn't fall. It slammed into him, claws tearing across his armor. Corinne jumped onto its back, driving her claws into the gaps between its plates. The beast roared and bucked. Daniel drew his blade again, but the leader spun, knocking it from his grip. For a moment, Corinne thought this was it. Then Daniel reached into his belt and pulled out the small metal sphere she had seen him use before. This one was different, covered in strange markings. Pulsing red, he jammed it against the predator's chest and shoved hard. Down. He barked, and this time she understood. Corinne threw herself to the dirt. The explosion was sharp, focused. When she looked up, the leader was gone. Nothing left but smoking armor fragments. The rest of the pack froze, leaderless. They hesitated. Daniel stood slowly, blood dripping down his side. He picked up his blade and took one step toward them. That was enough. They turned and vanished into the jungle, their glowing eyes swallowed by darkness. For a long time neither of them spoke. The only sound was the hiss of cooling metal and the distant echo of the predator's retreat. Finally, Corinne looked at him. "You leave now?" she asked, her voice rough. Daniel glanced up at the sky. Through the canopy, she saw a faint light descending. Not a flare this time, but something larger, a ship. He gave a small nod, then hesitated. "Come," he said simply, offering his hand. Corinne stared at it. The jungle was her world, her life, but it was also full of things that wanted her dead. And this human, dangerous as he was, had done something no one else ever had. He had fought for her. She took his hand, and together they walked toward the light. The jungle behind them faded into shadow. The hunt was over, but something told her their story was just beginning.